Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Most kids are probably like super excited that school's out, but we're gonna explore kind of the dark side of all that last day of school excitement. You guys shared some true stories from Mr. Nightmare's YouTube channel, and man, these are not your typical summer break vibes.
It is interesting, though, how we tend to, you know, romanticize the last day of school, associate it with just pure freedom and joy. But as we'll see, even amidst that excitement, there's this vulnerability that we often overlook.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the first story takes us back to elementary school, and there's this fourth grader, Tommy, and he's waiting to get picked up after the final bell. I mean, that sounds pretty relatable, right?
Oh, yeah.
Except things take a pretty dark turn when a man claiming to be his friend, Dennis's uncle, shows up.
And right away, there are some red flags. The man's described as really jittery. He's like talking fast and almost rushing Tommy through the crowds. That behavior could indicate that he's trying to disorient Tommy so he can't think clearly or question the situation.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to just sweep Tommy away before anyone can even notice. And the unease just keeps building as they arrive at the man's house. It's dark, curtains are drawn, and probably the most unsettling part is Dennis is nowhere to be found.
This is where we can start to see the classic signs of grooming behavior. The man uses the promise of seeing Dennis, who's like a familiar and trusted friend, to lure Tommy into this really vulnerable situation. He might even ask what seem to be like harmless questions about school or Tommy's interests, but it's all designed to build this false sense of trust and lower Tommy's guard.
Ugh, it's so disturbing how someone can manipulate a child's innocence like that. And in this case, it tragically works. Tommy is described as a shy kid, and he doesn't question anything until he's trapped inside the house with this total stranger. It's almost like a nightmare scenario that you'd never think could actually happen.
Right. This story just really highlights how crucial it is for parents to have these open and honest conversations with their children about personal safety. It's not about scaring them, it's about empowering them to be able to recognize and respond to dangerous situations. For example, like teaching them to question anyone who tries to take them somewhere without first verifying it with their parents, no matter how friendly or trustworthy that person might seem.
Totally. You can never be too careful, especially when it comes to your child's safety. But in this case, Tommy thankfully shows some incredible quick thinking under so much pressure. He manages to find a phone, dials 911, whispers his location, and then hides the phone under a towel. I mean, can you imagine the courage it took for him to do all of that?
It's pretty remarkable. And it goes to show that even in the most terrifying situations, children can display just incredible resilience and resourcefulness.
For sure. But even with that 911 call, the nightmare wasn't over. The man tries to force Tommy down to the basement, and it's only the arrival of the police, alerted by that hidden phone, that saves him. It's a chilling reminder that these situations can escalate so quickly, and every second counts.
This incident really underscores the just critical importance of school safety protocols. Schools should have very strict procedures for verifying the identity of anyone picking up a child, and parents should reinforce those rules with their kids. It's also crucial for schools to foster an environment where children feel comfortable reporting anything that feels off or unsafe to them.
All right, so let's move on to the second story. This one takes us to a very different setting. Imagine a group of high school seniors on their last day of school. They're celebrating their newfound freedom. They decide to go explore an abandoned elementary school on a stormy day. Kind of a classic teenage adventure, right?
Oh yeah, there's a definite allure to those abandoned places. They hold this sense of mystery, a glimpse into the past, and maybe even a thrill of the unknown.
Yeah, it's like stepping into a different world. A place where the rules of everyday life don't quite apply. But this story reminds us that these forgotten spaces can hold some pretty unexpected dangers. The group breaks into the decaying school. They're armed with flashlights and a sense of adventure, but they're totally unaware of what they're about to encounter.
The decaying building, the stormy weather, the isolation, it all creates this eerie atmosphere, sets the stage for a truly unsettling experience.
As they wander through the empty classrooms, their footsteps echoing in the silence, you can just practically feel the tension building. And then they hear it, the sound that makes them freeze in their tracks. What would you do in that situation?
The unknown has a way of just amplifying our fears, especially in a place like an abandoned school where our usual sense of security is kind of stripped away.
Oh, for sure. So they instinctively turn off their flashlights, hearts pounding, trying to figure out what's making that noise. And when they finally gather the courage to investigate, they catch a glimpse of something or someone lurking in a doorway.
It's such a chilling image, the way they describe it, a head peeking out from the darkness. It plays on our primal fears of the unknown. It's a moment where imagination runs wild, conjuring up all sorts of terrifying possibilities.
Yeah, it's like something straight out of a horror movie. They try to apologize and explain that they're leaving, but the figure doesn't respond. Just
Yeah.
keeps staring. That silence, that lack of any human interaction, just makes it even creepier, don't you think?
Absolutely. Silence can be just as unnerving as any sound, especially in a situation like that. You're left wondering, what are they thinking? What are they going to do? Our minds tend to fill in the blanks when faced with ambiguity, and often those imaginings are way more terrifying than reality.
Right. And one of the friends, Eddie, decides he's had enough.
Huh?
He grabs a baseball bat, smashes a window, and they all scramble out as fast as they can. It's like that fight or flight instinct kicking in, but with a huge dose of teenage adrenaline thrown in.
It's fascinating how people react so differently to fear. Some freeze, some flee, and some, like Eddie, become aggressive. It's a testament to the complexity of the human response to perceived threat.
Totally. And they never find out who or what that figure was. Was it a squatter, a security guard, something else?
They leave that abandoned school with more questions than answers and probably a healthy dose of lingering fear.
Those kinds of experiences, while unsettling, can also be profoundly formative. You know, they teach us about our own limits, our capacity for fear and courage, and how we react under pressure.
Okay, now buckle up for story number 3, because this one takes us into some seriously disturbing territory. It involves a college student. Let's call her Sarah. She finds herself the target of a classmate's unwanted attention after she rejects his advances. This one really hits close to home because it highlights a very real danger, particularly for young women. Yeah, this story delves into the complex and often misunderstood issue of stalking. It's a crime that can have just devastating psychological effects on the victim. And it's so crucial to recognize the warning signs and take action if you or someone you know is experiencing it.
Right. So Sarah's taking this really tough chemistry class,
Yeah.
and she's struggling to keep up. A classmate named Zach offers to help. And at first he seems harmless enough, maybe even a little awkward. He helps her with her homework, even lets her cheat off him during tests.
It might seem innocent on the surface, but there can be this subtle power dynamic at play in these situations. The helper, in this case Zach, might feel a sense of control or entitlement over the person they're helping. And when those feelings aren't reciprocated, it can lead to resentment and, as we'll see, even more troubling behavior.
Yeah, it's like he's building up this expectation of something in return for his kindness. And on the last day of class, Zach does something totally unexpected. He asks Sarah out on a date. Now, Sarah's not interested at all, but she tries to let him down gently. Even makes up a story about going to Miami. She's just trying to avoid conflict.
That's such a common scenario where someone misinterprets kindness or politeness for romantic interest. It's so important to remember that setting boundaries is not about being rude, it's about being clear about your intentions and expectations.
Totally. But unfortunately, things take a dark turn from there. Zach starts sending Sarah these creepy texts. He's questioning her whereabouts, accusing her of lying about Miami. It's like his nice guy persona completely disappears, and we start to see his true colors.
These texts are classic examples of stalker behavior. The possessiveness, the attempts to control her movements, the veiled threats. It's all very chilling and should be taken very seriously. We need to move away from this idea that stalking is just some harmless infatuation. It's a pattern of repeated and unwanted attention, harassment, or other behaviors that make someone feel scared, unsafe, or threatened.
And it's terrifying how technology can be used to facilitate this kind of harassment. Social media and texting make it so easy for someone to track and monitor their victim's every move. It's a complete invasion of privacy and can make someone feel trapped and vulnerable even in their own home.
Absolutely. The digital world has created new avenues for stalkers to exert control and power, and it's something we need to be much more aware of.
So Zach's texts are getting increasingly creepy, and then he takes things to a whole other level. He shows up at Sarah's house late at night.
This escalation is extremely concerning. It demonstrates a complete disregard for her boundaries and a willingness to intimidate her. It's important to understand that stalkers often escalate their behavior over time, and this kind of physical intrusion is a very serious red flag.
Sarah, understandably terrified, calls her dad and tells him everything that's been happening.
It's so important to seek support in these situations. Talking to someone you trust can help you process what's happening and develop a safety plan. It can be hard to see clearly when you're in the middle of such a frightening experience, and having someone to confide in and get advice from can make a huge difference.
Right. And thankfully, Sarah's dad takes action. He sends Zach a stern message, making it clear that his behavior is not okay and that he needs to leave Sarah alone. He even tries to call Zach to talk to him directly. But Zach, being the coward that he is, doesn't respond.
That silence can be almost more unnerving than a direct confrontation. It leaves you wondering what he's thinking, what he's planning next. It creates this sense of uncertainty and anxiety, making it difficult for the victim to feel safe.
Totally. But then things escalate even further. In the middle of the night, Sarah receives this long, rambling text from Zach. It's filled with entitlement, veiled threats, and this disturbingly distorted view of their relationship.
That text is so chilling. It reveals Zach's deep-seated anger and resentment towards Sarah for rejecting him. The veiled threats are his way of trying to regain control and instill fear in her. It's a clear indication that his behavior has become dangerous and unpredictable.
It's seriously messed up.
Oh,
Sarah's understandably freaked out and she goes to the police the next day.
that's absolutely the right thing to do. Stalking is a crime, and it's essential to report it to the authorities. Too often, victims are hesitant to involve the police. They're afraid they won't be taken seriously or that the situation will escalate. But it's crucial to remember that law enforcement is there to help and protect you.
Absolutely. And thankfully, the police do get involved. They contact Zach and they try to bring him in for questioning. But guess what? He disappears.
That's not uncommon in these types of situations. He probably realized the seriousness of his actions and the potential consequences. Stalkers often operate in this world of denial, justifying their behavior as romantic or persistent. But when they're confronted with the reality of the legal system, they tend to withdraw or try to cover their tracks.
Right. And luckily for Sarah, she never hears from them again.
Yeah.
But that experience, the fear, the violation, it undoubtedly stayed with her. It's a reminder that the effects of stalking can be so long-lasting and traumatic.
This story really underscores the importance of setting clear boundaries and recognizing those warning signs of stalker behavior. We need to empower individuals to trust their instincts and speak up when something feels wrong. Early intervention is key in these situations, both for protecting the victim and for potentially preventing the stalker's behavior from escalating further.
So we've now heard 3 very different last day of school stories, each with its own chilling elements. They all deal with very different situations, but there's a common thread running through them. What stands out to you about these stories?
One of the most striking things is that sense of vulnerability that emerges in each story. You know, we often associate the last day of school with this sense of liberation, a transition to freedom and fun. But it's also a time when routines change and we can be caught off guard, both literally and metaphorically. We might let our guard down, assume everyone is in that same celebratory mood, forgetting that not everyone has good intentions.
That's such a good point. We get caught up in all the excitement and anticipation, and we might not be as aware of our surroundings, of the potential dangers that might be lurking beneath the surface.
Exactly. And while these stories are disturbing, they also highlight the importance of awareness, self-protection, and speaking up when something feels wrong.
It's like a reminder that even in moments of joy and anticipation, we need to stay vigilant and prioritize our safety.
Absolutely. Trust your instincts, pay attention to red flags, and don't hesitate to seek help if you feel threatened. Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing how that excitement of the last day of school can sometimes make us more vulnerable.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to stay aware even when we're, in that celebratory mood. So to recap, in the last story we were discussing, Sarah had just gone to the police after being stalked by Zach, the guy who'd helped her in chemistry class. The police tried to question him, but he just disappeared.
And luckily for Sarah, she never heard from him again. But this doesn't diminish the experience that she went through. It was still terrifying for her. These stories, might make you wonder, how common are these kinds of last day incidents?
That's a great question. It's tough to get exact statistics on crimes that are specifically tied to the last day of school. Law enforcement databases don't usually categorize things that way.
Right, but we can look at some broader trends. For example, child abduction cases tend to spike during the summer months, and there's often an increase in property crimes when schools are out.
So even though we can't say for sure that the last day itself is statistically more dangerous, it's definitely a time when certain risks might be heightened.
Exactly. And it's a good reminder to be aware of our surroundings and to take precautions, not just for ourselves, but for our kids and our communities as well.
Now, while these stories are definitely unsettling, they also offer some valuable lessons, don't you think?
Absolutely. Each story, provides these insights into human behavior, both the positive and the negative. For example, Tommy's quick thinking in that first story really highlights the importance of empowering children, to trust their instincts and take action in those dangerous situations.
It's so inspiring to see how even a young child can display such courage and resourcefulness when they're faced with a terrifying situation.
It's a powerful reminder that we often underestimate children's ability to assess risk and protect themselves.
And then in the second story with the teenagers exploring that abandoned school, we see how fear can manifest so differently in different people. Some freeze up, some run away, some fight back. It's a testament to the complexity of our survival instincts.
Yeah, and it underscores the importance of understanding our own reactions to stress and fear. Knowing how we tend to respond in those high-pressure situations can help us make better decisions and potentially avoid making impulsive choices that could put us in even greater danger.
So going back to Sarah's story, it made me think about how easy it is for people to misinterpret kindness for romantic interest. Like Zach genuinely seemed like he was just trying to help her in chemistry class, but then he took things way too far.
This is such a common dynamic, especially in situations where there's a power imbalance, like a tutor and a student or a boss and an employee. The person in the position of power might perceive their actions as helpful and harmless, but the other person might feel pressured or obligated.
And it's so important to remember that everyone has the right to set boundaries, and those boundaries should be respected. It's not about being rude, it's about being clear about what you're comfortable with.
Exactly. And if those boundaries are crossed, it's crucial to speak up, seek support, and document the behavior. That documentation can be really valuable if you need to involve law enforcement or take legal action.
So while these stories are disturbing, they also empower us to be more aware, more prepared, and more proactive when it comes to our safety and the safety of those we care about.
They remind us that even amidst, the excitement and the anticipation of summer break, it's vital to stay vigilant and prioritize safety.
What do you think our listeners should take away from all of this?
I think the most important takeaway is the power of awareness. We've seen how awareness of our surroundings, awareness of red flags, and awareness of our own instincts can make a huge difference in navigating those potentially dangerous situations.
And not being afraid to speak up and seek help when something feels off.
Absolutely. Don't dismiss those gut feelings. If you feel uncomfortable or unsafe, trust your instincts and take action to protect yourself.
Well said. These stories, while dark, serve as important reminders to be vigilant and trust our instincts. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for our final thoughts on this unsettling but ultimately empowering deep dive into last day of school horror stories. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into last day of school horror stories. It's interesting how these stories have kind of shifted the mood, from those carefree summer vibes to a more cautious outlook.
It's not about letting fear, dominate our thoughts. It's about using these experiences to inform our actions and be more prepared for those unexpected situations. Knowledge is power.
I totally agree. It's about finding that balance between enjoying those carefree summer days and, staying vigilant about those potential dangers. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some practical tips our listeners can take away to stay safe? Not just on the last day of school, but, throughout the entire Zoomer break.
Well, first and foremost, I think it's crucial to maintain open communication with your children, especially younger ones. Talk to them about potential dangers. Encourage them to share anything that feels off or uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Create a safe space where they feel heard and validated.
It's like building that foundation of trust so they feel comfortable coming to you if something's wrong.
Exactly. And it's not just about talking, it's about active listening. Pay attention to their concerns, even if they seem small or insignificant. Sometimes children might not explicitly say that they're in danger, but they might drop hints or exhibit changes in behavior that could indicate something is wrong.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's about being attuned to those subtle cues. Now, for older kids and teenagers who might be a little more independent, what advice would you give them?
For teenagers, I think it's essential to emphasize the importance of personal responsibility and awareness. Remind them to be mindful of their surroundings. Avoid risky situations. And trust those gut instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Encourage them to travel in groups or at least let someone know where they're going and when they'll be back.
Technology can be a real double-edged sword. We saw that in Sarah's story. What are some ways to use technology safely and responsibly? Especially during the summer when kids might have more downtime and more access to their devices.
It's important to have those conversations about online safety, including responsible social media use, recognizing and avoiding online predators. protecting their personal information. Encourage them to be mindful of what they share online and to report any harassment or inappropriate behavior to a trusted adult.
Yeah, it's like that whole digital citizenship piece that's so crucial in today's world. And on a more practical level, are there any physical safety measures or tools that can help enhance personal security?
Certainly. Simple things like carrying a personal alarm, learning some basic self-defense techniques, or even having a safety app on your phone can provide an added layer of protection.
Those are all great tips. And I think it's also worth mentioning that safety is a shared responsibility. We can all play a role in creating safer communities by looking out for each other, reporting suspicious activity, intervening when we see someone in need.
Absolutely. It's about fostering a culture of vigilance and support. We can't live in constant fear, but we can be empowered by knowledge and proactive in our approach to safety.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key message you want our listeners to take away from these last day of school horror stories?
The last day of school should be a time for celebration and excitement, but it's also a reminder to stay vigilant and prioritize safety, not just for ourselves, but for our loved ones and our communities. By being aware, prepared, and connected, we can create a safer and more enjoyable summer for everyone.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your expertise with us today. And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has empowered you to stay safe and have a fantastic summer break.